I have mentioned in several of my videos that I've coached ice hockey for a good chunk of my life, 17 to 18 years at this point. And I got to coach at all levels in youth sports, whether it was beginners learn to skate stuff, hockey initiation programs, recreational leagues, and of course club travel hockey. Now, as I feel I'm nearing the end of that chapter, I feel it's necessary and fun to put it all down in rant form for your entertainment. And if you're listening to this, I'm sure you can still relate no matter what sport is involved, and I'm sure you have your own tales to tell in the comments. But because there's a lot to go over here, feel free to use the timestamps in the description to skip or come back to. And once again, these are not attacks, just examples of what I'm giving you from personal experiences when it comes to the worst parents in youth sports. Now, those who get pissed at their coaches over ice time, it is ticky-tacky because there are certainly examples of coaches who are total jerks when it comes to ice time. But that's a tale for a different rant, as it was always irritating when it was the last 2 minutes of the game and the score was close. So like any coach, we'd get our top players out there to preserve the game. And if we won the game, every parent was applauding and saying stuff like, "Oh, great move, Coach Anthony. You really coached them well today." But if the same situation happened and we lost, it was, "Why didn't you skate my kid? Why did you cut his ice time like that? What are you doing?" I get that kids can only get better if they're playing, but in travel hockey teams, the higher the level and the more serious the stakes, the more that shortening the bench is to be expected. In one of my first ever tournament games, my extended family came to check it out, and by midway through the second period, I was riding the pine, as they say. So my team ended up staging a major comeback, and we won the game. And as my family kept telling me, "Anthony, that was one of the greatest games I've ever seen," I was still too upset over being benched. Now, my dad understood, and he told me, "Son, you need to get better so it doesn't happen again." I know it's discouraging to be on the short end of it, and I know it's frustrating for parents who paid all this money to see their kids sit on the bench, but the thing is, they knew what they were getting into when they signed the letters of intent. And these teams often have policies in place to help cooler heads prevail when there's disagreements. So they have no excuse to go up to a coach as the team is getting off the ice, as the game is over, saying, "Hey, well, we pay the same amount of money as the rest of the players on this team. You're a blankety blank blank blank." Because that just results in the coach kicking the player off the team and the parents not being refunded. One team I played on as a Desert Coyote with the jersey number 22, hence my username, our coaches made it clear that every event in the weeks going forward to state playoffs was going to be mandatory. Practices, clinics, off-ice trainings, scrimmages, you name it. But then we had one player we'll name Andy. First, he gradually grew fatter as the season progressed, so he wasn't the fast, productive player he once was. And second, he got sick, and he missed out on a lot of the mandatory events. But when states came, he wasn't being played all that much due to how far he fell behind and his lack of production. And according to my father, Andy's dad kept clocking how much ice time he got and made remarks like, "In that 15-minute period, Andy only got 90 seconds of ice time." And his dad got irritated enough that he tried complaining to the Coyotes board of directors. But the board unanimously agreed that Andy's dad was being delusional, and they said, "Well, sorry, nothing we can do. Coach's decision. You realize it was states, right?" And then when I was finally coaching, whenever I received these complaints, I couldn't help but shake my head in disbelief as if to say, "Really? Are you for real?" "Hey, why won't you put my kid on special teams?" "Because I need the players I can rely on for special teams." "Hey, why won't the rest of the kids pass to my kid? He gets sad because they won't ever pass to him." "Maybe because your kid can only push with one leg and won't use the other one, thus it takes him forever to get from one end of the ice to the other. Are you not seeing how the referee isn't giving me a too many men delay of game penalty when I have my next line out and the puck drops and he's still trying to skate to the bench?" Another example I'll provide will be a young 8U goalie named Dwyer. He was supposed to be our starting goalie that year and was decent most of the time. But in a tournament championship game with the score tied 1-1 after 2 periods, Dwyer started melting down, and within a few minutes, he gave up 3 quick bad goals to start the 3rd period. So the head coach pulled Dwyer and put the backup in. Well, Dwyer's parents were not happy about that. And as they were banging on the glass to get our attention, the head coach was telling me not to look back and acknowledge it. And our backup only allowed 1 more goal, and he gave our team a chance to recover the deficit, which we nearly did. Final score, lose 5-4. After the game, Dwyer's parents were seething and proceeded to tell the head coach how much he shattered Dwyer's confidence, how much he disrespected Dwyer, how much he disrespected his parents and his whole family who came to watch the game. And the head coach remarked that, hey, goalies get pulled and switched back and forth. You know, he made the decision that it would benefit the team the most to try to get them back in the game. And of course, the parents remarked that the coach didn't know what he was talking about. And then he just remarked, oh, well, I'm a classified certified referee and coach. And, when I was playing, I was on state and regional championship teams that competed for nationals. So I think I know what I'm talking about. When it comes to the parents with too high expectations, most of the examples I usually encountered were in the initiation programs, the kind meant to introduce a new player to the sport. Now, ice hockey isn't exactly an easy sport to do, and one can't simply just go play the sport on a school playground or a park, especially in warmer climates where a sheet of ice to play on is a luxury commodity. So, to attract new kids, lots of rinks have promotional classes where a kid may get a few free lessons to try out, even if it's just to get used to the ice before they officially sign up for the weekly programs or something of the sort to ease them in. So the rink I worked at for 11 to 12 years, which we'll call Metro Ice, had a lot of programs with classes like this. Logically, the parents would have to understand that the kid is new and won't get it right away. But not this example. One class I noticed a parent that was getting really ticked off that his young kid was still using the things to hold the kids up to push, among several other kids who were doing the same thing. I went up to them and I asked them what was wrong, and they continued to complain about their kid using the little thing. And I asked them, well, how old is he and how many times has he been on the ice? Well, he's 5, and he's been on the ice a few times, but the last time he didn't need that thing to skate with. Okay, and when was the last time he was on the ice? Oh, like a year or 2 ago? Oh, well, that's a long time for a preschooler, don't you think? Whatever muscle memory he had, it's gone, and I'm sure it'll come back if he sticks with it. Now, they didn't like that answer, and unfortunately, I didn't see them much after that. And another time, a father came up to me and said, so I'm looking to get my kid into hockey, but I don't want to spend all this time and money if he ain't going to get a college scholarship. Well, sir, statistically, only a small percentage ever make it that far, and most stop before they even get to high school. Oh, well, I don't want him to waste my time if he's not going to go far. Now again, this kid had never stepped on the ice, let alone even been given the chance to enjoy it and see where it went. And this dad was already thinking about college prospects. And surprisingly, he wasn't the stereotype that Family Guy has once parodied.
You doctor yet?
No, Dad, I'm 12.
Talk to me when you doctor.
I would surely have hated being that dad's kid. Oh, I'm sure there's plenty of people who know about a kid that was forced to do a sport that they didn't want to do. I assistant coached on a team that my nephew also played on, with this cast of characters including Dwyer from earlier. Now for the next example on this travel team, we'll bring you Flint, who just wasn't very good. Now the issue with him was that it was really tough communicating and motivating him because he cried a lot when he felt pressured or intimidated, or he was just extremely sensitive, more so than a normal boy that age would be. Every practice or game, it seemed, it was always a matter of when Flint would melt down, to the point where he'd miss out on his regular ice time because he was too busy crying on the bench. And poor Flint was terrible and just not having it when after a couple of travel seasons under his belt, Flint's sister tried it out and joined him on a rec league team, and despite never playing a single game before, was already better at it than he was. And it's not out of the ordinary for youth games to require a ref stoppage and the need for a coach to escort a hurt player back to the bench. But whenever Flint did it, he was not actually hurt. He was just having one of his meltdowns. So it was a waste of time. And it got to the point where even the head coach told me, "Anthony, can you go get Flint? I'm done with this kid." And after the game, Flint's dad came up to me and he said, "Well, hey man, thanks for helping get him off the ice." And I just looked at his dad and I said, yeah, well, I don't think Flint likes this." "What do you mean?" "I'm saying he doesn't enjoy this sport at all." "Well, I know he cries a lot, but he tells me all the time how much he likes it." I think he's just saying what you want to hear. No child who actually enjoys this sport has even as close as many meltdowns as your son does. And sure, I could list this as an example of some of the worst kids in youth sports, but it was obvious that Flint was only doing it because his dad wanted him to. And I get wanting your kid to play a sport that you played, but it shouldn't take that long to realize, wait, this isn't for him. And in this case, it somehow took this dad 2 full travel seasons to notice it. Another example that sticks out after all these years was a kid who we'll call Norman, who immediately gave off this weird, creepy vibe during those 6 weeks we had him. What did he do, you ask? Norman, from the moment he stepped on the ice to the moment he stepped off, this poor kid had a forced smile on his face the entire time. Whether he was standing in line or actively doing a drill or whatever, he kept this forced smile up the entire hour. And I don't know how he did it. And as he kept it up, you could tell he was uncomfortable. He wasn't enjoying it out there. But he somehow did this forced smile every session we had him. And once the program was done, the father actually came up to me and he said, "Hey, I know my son Norman wasn't that good out there, but can you pretend to make a speech and give my kid this puck as an award so he feels like he did something?" I had a weird feeling as I did it. Never saw Norman again after that. Now, my theory is that Norman probably got scared and he didn't want to be out there, so his dad put the fear of God in him and he said, "Oh, you will do it, and you will do it cheerfully and with a smile, or else." And unfortunately, lots of kids get forced into youth sports they don't want to do. Now, I can understand it's for the sake of the kid's health or just to get them out of the house and less time on an iPad screen. And I do also understand the need to finish the season so you don't waste your money, as a lot of these programs don't refund players who quit. And whatever the reason, it is still sad when they're clearly not having it, and we can only hope they find something the kid likes to do that the parent can be involved. But speaking of parents selfishly choosing not to be involved, now, not every divorced couple is a pain. The couples with shared custody that agree to get their kids to every event regardless of whose week or weekend it is, and the split couples who continue to remain civil and co-parent their child for the sake and well-being of their children, those people are amazing. I've had zero issues with the couples who tell me, "Oh no, don't worry about it, coach. We've worked it all out. He'll be at every event. We're good." We love those couples. But the split couples that refuse to take their kid to a sport, especially something as expensive as hockey, because, oh, that's what the other parent does, not my time. Even if the kid really enjoys the sport and is good at it, doesn't matter, doesn't bother, because that's the other parent's thing. It was always sad to see these cases where we'd only see a kid for half the events, even if it was an important tournament game or a playoff game. And the worst cases happen when the player in question just wasn't advancing as much as the rest due to missing out on too many things. And in other times, parents' attitudes rubbed off on these kids, and the kids started acting as separated from the sport as the attitude of the deadbeat parent who didn't want to be there. And it also got to be annoying when you try to talk to one of these parents about their kid, whether it was something good or it was something bad. And it would turn into a conversation where all this parent did was talk smack about the other parent. Oh, our kid only does this because his mom babies him all the time. No, it's because of his dad. He won't pay for anything or provide support. Oh, she's just a lying, cheating whore. Oh, he's just a deadbeat loser. I mean, I've been divorced too. I get it. But not everyone needs to hear their dirty laundry. And I was the kind of coach who gave out my number to all the parents on the team to essentially say, hey, if your kid isn't going to be there for whatever reason, just let me know. Simple human interaction and courtesy communication. But the parents that were the worst at communicating with me were the divorced parents, or the one that wouldn't take them. So I'd see a kid not present, and then I'd inquire only to be told, oh, sorry, coach, he's with his dad this weekend. His dad told me they were going to take him. I guess he didn't. Sorry, coach, he really wants to be there, but his mom won't take him. And sadly, there's just too many examples to count over the 17 to 18 years I coached. And ultimately, it ruined the experience of the kid playing the sport. And unless the kid got into a sport that both parents could agree to, it robbed them of the full experience that a team sport could offer. The parents that are always negative, never positive in this category just have an overall negative personality. And there were lots of times that if I, as the coach, felt like the kid was doing good, the parent would find some lame excuse to put them down.
And another tip for the parents, be positive. I am so sick and tired of seeing parents coming up ridiculing. Kid gets a hat trick and the father said, you should have had 4.
Like, seriously? You're not going to compliment them on getting a hat trick and you're going to yell at them instead? The hell is wrong with you? Where's the emotional support? What are you saying to pump them up? At Metro Ice, I remember a kid in a learn to skate class, probably pre-kindergarten age, getting on the ice and struggling. So when I got close to him, I could see him start to cry. And trying to comfort him, I asked, well, no, hey, buddy, are you scared? And he nodded his head yes. And I asked him, well, are you scared of the ice? And he shook his head no. And then I asked, okay, well, what's scaring you? And he just pointed right to his dad, who was giving him a really depressing scowl from behind the glass. This poor kid is just starting and he already has to deal with that. So it's hard not to feel bad for them. These were often kids who were raised in what some might say dysfunctional families, where everyone around these kids are cynical assholes. And it even made worse when the kid happens to be playing on a team that isn't very good nor wins that much. And in cases like these, it's just tough to motivate the kid in general when no matter what happens, he gets chewed out at home over whatever. Back on my nephew's team with Flint and Dwyer, there was another kid we'll call Albert. Albert always had his parents criticize everything he did while getting dressed in the locker room. And after a tough loss, his relatives would usually say things like, well, we sucked out there again. It even got to the point where my sister-in-law yelled back at them, excuse me? My kid didn't suck. Don't you ever say that my kid sucked out there. He tried as hard as he could. And when our team finally won a game and Albert actually played good, I tried to compliment that to his kids' parents. Hey, Albert did really good out there. I loved it when he made that good pass. And they just scoffed and went, I suppose. Now, I'm not saying that a kid needs positive reinforcement 100% of the time. It should be balanced, or the negatives should usually be sandwiched between positives. And I get that some kids may lose the motivation if they get too much positive reinforcement, but how is the kid ever going to know he's supported or loved or even getting better out there if he's constantly subject being told what wrongs he did? That 1996 movie Shine, the one that Jeffrey Rush got an Oscar for, is a prime example of a gifted child never knowing how good or successful he was due to his overbearing father that had no tolerance for imperfection, disobedience, or dishonor, and the mental breakdowns that result from it. Ah, yes. Now, when it comes to those who cause trouble in the stands, we've seen the clips floating around on the internet of parents starting fights or fights that break out onto the field of play or even the ice sometimes. And the reasons stem from a variety of causes. And I'm sure there are real-life Randy Marshes that get kicked out or even arrested whenever his son plays a sport. Now, are there times when it's justified when a parent yells at something at the referee? Oh, of course there is, especially in situations where their kid gets injured or by a blatant cheap shot and the referee lets it go. But throughout my playing time and coaching days, there were a fair share of parents that were known to yell obscenities at the officials, other coaches, and other players that were not on their child's team. One kid we'll name Elijah was a child when I coached him, later went on and played juniors. But because of the color of his skin and because Elijah was really good, there were morons who yelled racial remarks at him like, "Go back to Ethiopia or Kenya or wherever you're from." And while the racial remarks did hurt, he and his white adopted parents couldn't help but laugh at the stupidity of it, given that Elijah was originally born in the Deep South and was as American as apple pie. And we all know that any youth player that would be yelling these racial remarks, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out where they learned it from. And when the parents weren't yelling at anything at the people involved within the sanctioned game, they could be acting obnoxious and antagonistic towards the parents of the other teams, sometimes with alcohol involved. In the first tournament I played for, we had this team that came from another state that had really cocky parents. And they went right up to my father and a few other parents watching our game and went, "So, are those your kids on the Coyotes?" Yes, why? "Oh, we're just apologizing in advance for how badly we're going to beat you tonight." Oh yeah, they were that confident they were going to beat us and win it all. It didn't happen, but still. We hate dealing with the parents of other teams that cheer when one of our own gets hurt and is laying on the ice. We hate seeing parents that act like their kids are doing no wrong or they are the next NHL superstar when they're obviously doing things like spearing our players with sticks and slew footing or any other dirty tactic that can result in serious injury. Even as far down as the 8 and under level, I have walked by locker rooms and overheard the parents of these teams encouraging their kids to make hits in non-checking games. And when the game doesn't go their way, we'll get the parents that keep yelling out, "Oh, you're a bunch of cheaters," blah, 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 typical BS trash talk that happens when your emotions flare up. We actually have to think about how much it actually ruins it for the kids involved, especially when there are kids who get encouraged by their parents to make cheap shots or play dirty on a regular basis because, "Hey, you gotta do whatever it takes to win, son." Look, you can tell your kids to always defend themselves and never back down, but parents that let their kids off leashes, so to speak, often have to deal with consequences later, such as ejections, suspensions, in some cases being banned and expelled from rinks and leagues, sometimes jail time, and then of course reputations and careers ruin because coaches hear about this stuff and then they don't want them if their kids are head cases along with their parents. Are there coaches that are guilty of encouraging circus acts too? Yes, but that's a rant for another time. All throughout my playing and coaching days, there were definitely people that just took it way too seriously. You know in the Mighty Ducks Game Changers where the lead hockey mom character criticizes a parent for bringing their sports trainer and nutritionist to their kid's hockey practice? Well, believe me, that's a reality, and I've seen and dealt with crazier. I've seen a kid who hid an earpiece in his helmet, and the father would be off the ice with a walkie-talkie constantly in his ear, even if it was just free skate or free stick time. Like, seriously, who's supposed to be coaching this kid? Was he doing it to save money on lessons? This guy wasn't a coach. What the hell would he know? And it amazed me how much it was tolerated to the extent it was. And there's, of course, the kind of parents who try to make their kid treat every practice and clinic like it's the most important event of their life, always having to go 110%, 100% of the time with no time to kick back. And of course, there's those that would say, oh, it's just them reliving their glory days or living their glory days through their kid. Now, whether it's rec league or travel or beyond, you got to realize all these overzealous parents are forgetting is these kids are fucking kids. They feel emotions. They go through mood swings. They get hurt physically and emotionally. They're human beings and cannot be expected to be consistent 100% of the time. Even the pros are not consistent and have slumps. That's why in the playoffs, they play in best of 7 series, not best of 3 or 5 anymore. A good friend of mine told me that when he was growing up, all his dad ever pointed out was his plus-minus stat. Whether he won or not, whether he made a difference, son, you were a -3 today. But Dad, what about the goal I scored? You were still a -3. Now I remember one poor kid we'll call Saul who became a goalie when he was super young and got convinced to play on a travel team in a league where kids were already experienced and 2 years older than he was. So naturally, Saul let in goals. But that didn't stop a bunch of idiot parents from loudly banging on the glass and shouting things at Saul from the stands, and then making the poor kid cry. It was so bad that it turned this prospect off travel hockey forever, and so he played rec league for the remainder of his youth. And yeah, just like the serious figure skaters who are homeschooled and spend every day on the ice, I've seen hockey players who do this at young ages, where they practically live at the rink. And yeah, the kid might get really good, but is sacrificing their childhood really worth it? Now, when I got into serious travel hockey, yeah, I missed a lot of friends and family birthday parties and other family events because of me needing to go to a practice or even a lesson. Now, yeah, I did that when I was a teenager trying to specialize in the sport as far as I could go. But I knew of plenty of kids who tried specializing when they hadn't even hit double digits yet in age.
Come on, let me hear you say it just once. Come on.
Oh, but I'm worried my child will never be seen by scouts if he doesn't do this or that.
Wrong!
Believe me, folks, we'll see him. Wherever he plays, if he's good, we'll see him.
Hockey itself is also a late bloomer sport, where coaches and juniors and college really don't care how many goals the kids scored or how many games they won when they were 8. But they do care that they have that it factor when they're the proper age or so, and it's not necessarily how good they are. And the sad reality is that many kids get super serious at a young age, burn out by the time they reach high school when they're supposed to be specializing. Players that have a shot at juniors or college teams and beyond, they end up quitting because it's just not fun for them anymore. Or in one case, I heard the dude quit because so he could get back at his dad. Now, I started when I was 11, and I knew of a few players that started after me that got better than me. And then there were players who were total studs, like Andy from before, who was the best player on the first travel team I played with, but eventually, as he stopped growing taller and grew fatter instead, by the time we were both 15, Andy was on his way out of the sport, whereas I kept going and had a shot at making juniors a few years later, and then coached the sport for 17 to 18 years. The people that I like to call letter chasers go hand in hand with those who take it way too seriously. And this one often leads to delusions that end up hurting the kid in the end. Now, I get that it's part of the business, where a kid essentially graduates to a higher skill level. And it's a matter of, hey, does the kid do more than hang at this new level? Will the kid get regular playing time? Does the coach see that he'll get better and fit in with the team? If the answer to all that is yes, then absolutely, I'm all for the kid moving up, whether it's from rec league to travel, or B level to A, or so on and so forth. But I think that the chase for these higher divisions and these higher letter grades when it comes to AA and AAA level in youth hockey should only be restricted to the teenage years when they're specializing, not when they're freaking 8 to 10 years old. I'm a firm believer that when these kids are young, it should be about fun and fun, nothing else. And that doesn't stop these parents from shopping around and seeing what the other clubs have to offer when their kids would rather just stay with their friends, whether or not they win or lose. On one of the club teams I coached for, which we'll call the Wild, there'd be instances where I'd see a kid not attend my team practice and then come to find out that their parent took them to an open clinic at another rink for another club. All because they really wanted their kid out there with these higher level players. Why practice with his team and try to develop any chemistry with his teammates? Who needs that when the club that's 30 miles away has a clinic coached by Irving Twinkletoes? Oh no! And after a couple years with this core players on the Wild that I was coaching, we started dominating the other clubs in the 8U age group. And it seemed like they were all happy that the kids were playing well together and we were potentially moving up to a higher division altogether. But then to everyone's surprise, including my bosses, when tryouts came, at least half of them went and signed with another club that was again 30 miles away. And it was a snowball effect. First it was one, then it was two, then another followed, then another followed, then another. And it even caused the person who was supposed to be my team manager next season to follow the crowd over because he was convinced the Wild wasn't going to have a proper 8U travel team that next season. Well, we would have had one if you people didn't just leave. These parents decided it was worth going to a more expensive club that was further away and spending more money on gas alone and more driving time rather than just stay with the Wild where they were already dominating other clubs, and they would have kept doing so had they stayed together. It was a huge kick to the gut to me when this happened, and unfortunately, when I was working at Metro-Ice, it seemed like we were a factory that built up these players only to see them leave because their parents thought the grass was greener somewhere else. Once again, back on the team that my nephew played on that featured Flint, Albert, and Dwyer, the backup goalie we will name Red, who despite being younger and newer ended up surpassing Dwyer in skill and determination as the season progressed. But then the next season came, and rather than have Red be a starting goaltender on a B-level team where he'd get the most playing time, his parents got convinced that Red needed to be the second backup goalie on an A-level team where he would barely get any playing time. And I remember one Halloween party they hung out with us, and all Red's dad kept mentioning was his kid was on a 10U A team. And this happens a lot. The parents' egos get larger than their damn heads. Oh, never mind how much your kid actually plays or how much he makes a difference. He's still an A player. Yeah, right. He may be on the team, but he's not one of them. Now, when I was playing, there would be some years where myself and other players I knew were asked to be on higher level teams, but we refused and stayed at these lower level teams because we preferred the coach of that respective team. Other coaches of these A teams would say I made the team and they'd take me, but then they'd say I wouldn't get much playing time, so it was better if I stayed where I could play. And the thing about that is, once you get into double and triple A levels, it costs way more money and requires way more time and sacrifice to have your kid even play on these teams. So imagine spending 10 figures a year for your kid to play travel hockey only to have them sit on the bench as a third or fourth liner. Now, in the old days, when you were trying out for travel teams at the respective levels, it was one team per level. So if you didn't make double A, you went for A. And if you didn't make A, you went for double B or then B. And if you didn't make that, then you either tried out for another club or you were stuck in a rec league for the next fiscal year. Travel hockey is not, nor should not be, for everyone. But nowadays, rather than turn people away, they'll try to make several teams per level, like having 2 to 3 A teams per age group, or 3 to 4 B teams in the same age group, while other clubs are struggling to make even one team at that skill level. And the problem here is because travel accepts way more kids now, it guts out the more local recreational programs that clubs need a large base of kids built up to recruit from. Every fiscal year, we'd get the kids out to learn to play programs and into the house leagues and built up these competitive leagues of multiple teams. But by the end of the fiscal year, which was late spring, we would see our house programs gutted because the travel teams would scrape from the bottom of the barrel to fill these teams, whether or not these players were any good. And that's exactly what this club, we'll call the Mavericks in this case, was guilty of. It was obvious they cared more about the pocketbooks of the customers because that meant the club got their money. One would consider this to be shady practices, and when I coached travel, I always hated that side of it. So lots of times, these kids were not even the best players in rec league teams, would get recruited to play on these teams at high levels. And these parents are thinking, oh, really? Is my kid ready? Wait, you say he's ready? Oh, he gets to play on this A team? Oh, wow, that is awesome. And then these teams get set and then they get their asses kicked. And I mean massacred by true travel level teams. All because these greedy clubs wanted their next paycheck. And then what happens after that? They either quit or they leave for another club. Now, there was one kid I gave private skating lessons to who was still preschool age. We'll call him Adam. And even with one-on-one instruction, it was baby steps with him because of his attention span. But then lo and behold, I saw Adam out there with the Mavericks, with all these other kids that were 3 to 4 years older than him. And he was not even watching the damn puck. The play would be on one side, and then Adam would be over on the other side with his head down, not even paying attention to the game. And I had to tell his father so many times, what is Adam doing out here? He's not even close to being ready for these clinics. I don't care what that Mavericks coach told you. You're wasting your money having him out there with these kids. Yeah, coach, I can see that. Can you see that coach is not even trying to do anything with them? Sure, I guess. So I also told him if you're going to spend money for this kid to fall down and make snow angels, you're better off doing it in the initiation classes. It's way cheaper. And Adam's father just nodded his head in agreement. Oh, sure, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I guess you're right. But he never pulled Adam out of these clinics. He was definitely the I have FU money and I'll spend it on what I want. But sadly, over that summer, Adam's father accidentally died, and I never saw that kid at Metro Ice after that. There was one kid I coached in a hockey initiation class, not even a rec league team, but a class. And he had previously been moved up to this third class by a prior coach who didn't know what he was doing. But when I took over the third class, I saw this kid couldn't even do a basic skating move to save his life, which was one of the criteria needed to pass the class prior. So I moved him back down. But the next week or so, that same kid came right up to me and he said, I made the Mavericks. And I was dumbstruck, but not surprised that the Mavericks' swindling tactics struck again. Because now they were poaching kids out of learn to play classes to get their money. I even went up to this kid's mother and I said, do you have any clue how big of a leap it is from this class to what you signed your kid up for? I guess. You realize I just demoted him because he didn't have all the basic skating skills. Oh, it's fine. His dad played hockey in college. I was always realistic in situations like that. And when parents would ask me, hey, I got an email from the Mavericks inviting my kid to join their team. And I'd look at them and I'd say, let's be real. Have they even seen your kid play? He's only been playing rec league for a month. But unfortunately, way too many cases existed of parents' egos getting way too big, and that humble, grateful, fun parent that I loved interacting with when they were starting out turned into this, suddenly this club or this team isn't good enough for their kid. Now, when I thought I was done coaching at Metro Ice for good in 2017 due to other jobs getting added to my plate, I had this core of families that I had spent the last year or two building up. And after winning a rec league championship together at Metro Ice with me, they had graduated and gone to a different rink and club, which we'll call the Monarchs, winning a travel league championship together on this same Monarchs team. And these parents told me, oh no, Anthony, don't stop coaching. We need you. They only won that championship because over half that Monarchs team was kids you trained. Please don't stop coaching. Come over to the Monarchs. They begged me so much to give the Monarchs a shot, and so I did. But for the 2018-2019 season, we had to be on separate teams, they being 12U, and I was offered a job for the 16U team. As that season progressed, due to a variety of circumstances, they soured on the Monarchs, and they began shopping around. So the next season, when I was actually eligible to coach their kids at the same age level, they had all left, even though I was only at the Monarchs because of them. So of course, they were all going for the higher level teams at these other clubs, which again, further away. But when one of them decided the grass wasn't greener on this Mavericks A team and got released, instead of putting their kid on my double B level Monarchs team, they instead grandstanded to the team we'll call the Admirals, who were just a few exits over because that team was first place in our division while we were still battling for 7th to 8th place in a division of 16 teams. Again, choosing to put him on an already stacked 12U team where the coach didn't know him and where he'd be a perennial 3rd to 4th liner and not much of a difference maker, instead of putting him on my Monarchs team where I knew the kid and he'd easily be a top 6 forward or a starting defenseman. So they forewent more playing time just for more wins. And after all of this had happened, I remember seeing a post on social media from one of these core parents, and they were sharing memories of all of our rec league championships together, with comments from the other core parents going, "Oh, I miss those days. Oh, they were the best. Coach Anthony was the best. We miss Coach Anthony." And in my mind, I'm thinking, if I was as good as of a coach as you said I was, and you said you needed me, then why did you all leave? So fed up with everything I had transpired, I left a comment saying, that could have all been us again this year, but when you guys all had the chance to have me coach them all again, you all went where the grass was greener. And yeah, too many times I've dealt with families that turned heel once the idea of putting their kids on higher level teams meant more than putting them on the right teams. Like I said, are there absolutely cases where putting them on the higher level team is the right team? Yes. But if they're not getting that much ice time, nor not really having as much fun as they would, or in some cases, if the coach is an asshole, or if there are players or parents on the team that ruin the experience for everyone, then it won't matter how many wins they get, no matter how many championships they win. It isn't worth it at the end. And I've seen it where these teams would win championships and then dissolve because these players had too much of a miserable time. Parents who bribe their kids with money or other types of presents or gifts to get their kid to perform in youth sports is a huge pet peeve of coaches. If you have to bribe your kids with financial incentives or expensive gifts to score more points, then your kid doesn't love the sport enough and shouldn't be playing. The professionals may get such incentives and endorsement deals, but in youth sports, these are freaking kids. They're not pros. They're not getting scouted by NHL teams. And oftentimes, it leads to selfish play attempting to chase after BS stats rather than teach these kids to work with their teammates. And if the word gets out that, little Johnny gets $5 every time this happens, then it leads to resentment among other players who are thinking, well, how come I don't get anything like that when I score? But then he gets all of that stuff from his mom and dad. Now, while I was assistant coaching another 8U team on the Wild, there was a game that was pretty much in the refrigerator by the second period. We were blowing this team out. So in games like this, we as coaches would try to get more ice time and opportunities for kids who normally ride pine in tighter games. As such, we put Damien out there, who never had a goal all season, on the same line as Jason, who scored regularly and already had 2 goals this game. A 2-on-0 breakaway situation happened, and Damien had a huge chance to get a goal. And we were even saying from the bench, "Jason, pass it to Damien." But instead, Jason ripped it in to get his hat trick. So we asked Jason, hey, we asked you to pass it to Damien so he could have a chance. Why didn't you pass it? And Jason said, well, my dad said he'd give me $20 if I got 3 goals. So we went right up to Jason's dad and said, hey, Jason told us that you give him money if he got 3 goals today. Is there a reason why you would do that when we're trying to teach these kids unselfish play? And the dad kind of dodged the question and he said, well, I didn't say 3 goals. I said 3 points. And then there was Baldwin and his parents, who unfortunately alone provide plenty of material to serve as examples in different categories, but you'll see why. While coaching this Monarchs 12U team, we were halfway through the season and working our way back up to a winning record after a tough start, and we were playing this 4th place team in a tough game. Before this game, a couple of players went up to me and said, Baldwin's telling everyone he needs us to help him get 4 goals so his dad will take him to the AHL game. And then I asked Baldwin and he confirmed me, yeah, my dad said he'll take me to the game if I get 4 goals. And we're just thinking, oh, brother. Now, 1, this family was wealthy enough, so going to AHL games was not a once-in-a-lifetime expense. They had season tickets and went all the time. Nothing really worth bribing this kid over. And 2, in competitive games, it's rare for even top NHL stars to get 4 goals in a game. In fact, it makes the news when it does happen. So why the dad would even think to come up with that figure, I don't know. And what was worse about this was that Baldwin may have been our top goal scorer, but but he had the reputation of being a puck hog. So as a result, the rest of the players were already thinking, really? Screw you then. And his line mates must have been thinking, great. Now he's never going to pass us the puck this game. So yeah, any team dynamic that we needed, that we had going into the game, went out the window because they were already pissed off at Baldwin. The game went on, and it became super obvious to everyone watching that Baldwin is not going to pass the puck. He had plenty of good scoring chances and plenty of potential plays with open men, especially 3-on-2 rushes, 2-on-1s, and even a couple of 2-on-0s. But instead of passing, Baldwin kept taking bad angle shots or losing the puck when under any pressure despite obvious open teammates. The other team figured out, oh, hey, number 24, he's not going to pass the puck. It was so bad that it caused one of our own parents to get rejected from the game and suspended because he loudly yelled out, "Pass the fucking puck, Baldwin!" Meanwhile, each time Baldwin looked up to his parents behind the glass, his father could visibly be seen holding up 4 fingers. Now, we lost the game, and our eyes are definitely on Baldwin over the obvious selfish play. So I had to set aside his parents along with all of our coaches and managers to get to the bottom of this. And I asked his parents outright, hey, before the game, his line mates were telling me things that didn't help the team. So I have to ask, did you tell Baldwin if he scored 4 goals that you take him to the game tonight? And they denied it. But then when I said, but you were visibly seen holding up 4 fingers every time he looked at you, what was that about? And then they started half-assing admitting it. Oh, we were just trying to motivate him. He asked if he could go, and I said, well, only if you got enough points. So he must have taken it literally. And I said, look, I'm not going to tell you how to parent your kid, but Baldwin shouldn't be telling his teammates in a locker room things like, help me get 4 goals so my dad will take me to the game. Because before that game even started, the rest of the team was already pissed at him. And when you saw during the game, it got to the point where other parents were yelling at him to pass the puck. So then the parents started getting standoffish and playing the victim card. And then they claimed we were ganging up on them. And then for the rest of the time I had Baldwin as a player, they would refer to this incident as if it was a conspiracy against him. When it comes to the parents that just always seem to provide excuse after excuse, I will give one example from a teammate I had, while the other one was a kid I coached. Now, the teammate I had, we'll call him Eddie, and he was deaf. And I'm sure it was tough with the communication barrier at times. But the issue with Eddie wasn't the fact he was deaf, because most deaf people are cool and function normally and properly, albeit having to overcome their hearing disability. The issue with Eddie was that he was an empty-headed asshole who did stupid things on the ice. Too many instances to list in a rant where I'm focusing on the parents. It was a constant cycle with Eddie and his parents. No matter how many times this guy got in trouble, he was somehow always allowed back. So that can obviously be attributed to his parents using the "but he's deaf" card too many times to count. Now, the last time I checked, he was not mentally retarded, just deaf. And unfortunately, it wasn't an occasional thing, it was all the time. Things that any person with normal hearing would have easily been given lifetime bans for. But still, Eddie kept coming back. The biggest example here is after we lost the tournament game, Eddie started to act out and cause a scene, making a bunch of noise, hitting his stick on the glass boards, blah, blah, blah. We get to the locker room and he's throwing trash cans and banging on the walls. And after our captains tried to get him to calm down, he shoved both of them away. So then our coach tapped on him and Eddie turned around and tried to punch our coach in the face. The coach then calmly but sternly gestured him to leave and even threw his bag and stuff out of the locker room. And I remember the coach saying, "All right, guys, Eddie's done. He's not coming back after this." The rest of the team, we had a dinner at a place in Jack London Square. And we all thought for sure Eddie was going to get kicked out. And some of us were actually cherishing the thought of it. And then lo and behold, late into the dinner, Eddie just showed up with his parents trying to make amends and shake everyone's hands. And we were left stunned and resenting the fact that we were stuck with him for the rest of the season. And then back to Baldwin from before. Now, to my understanding with Baldwin, it was more than one neurodevelopmental disorder. And yes, in this day and age, a lot of kids get medically diagnosed with such things, and no two cases are the same, especially when medications are involved. You can have two kids diagnosed with the same thing, and one can be a rewarding experience to work with, while the other ruins the experience and makes the coach dread the situation. But it really just depends on how much the parents allow the coach to do what he needs to do. Baldwin had natural talent and was usually the team's top goal scorer on any team he was on when he was growing up. But he was a terrible teammate and nearly impossible to coach. And his parents were part of the problem. For example, his parents complained that other kids were making fun of him in the locker room or being bullies to him, etc., which led to investigations with our safe sport coordinators, other coaches in our club, and the club president. But we ended up concluding that it was Baldwin who usually instigated it. So they weren't too happy when we told his parents they needed to get their kid to behave. But because Baldwin did a lot of the things that any terrible teammate would do, whenever anyone wanted to approach his parents about it, they always played the victim card, or they would blame the other kids. Oh, he's always being targeted. You need to stop singling him out all the time. It's how he is. It's the only way he knows how to communicate. It's not fair that you single him out over all the time, while all the other kids are making mistakes too. Now, later on, when Baldwin went to other clubs, I'd find out through the grapevine, because of the world of youth hockey travel being very small, that his parents would be dealing with the same issues as before. So the more things changed, the more they stayed the same. And yes, rather than try to fix what their kid is doing, it was always somebody else to blame.
You know, and I got another little tip for you parents out there. Don't be a pain. Many kids' career has been ruined by the father interfering. He should do this, should do that, talking to the scouts. And you know, when you get a kid like that, you know what they say? You get 2-for-1 package, and nobody wants them.
Many of these examples I listed prior could also be considered 2-in-1 packages because of how much we were dealing with the parent as much as the kid. Getting mad over playing time issues when their kid isn't doing anything to make me want to skate them. Parents always telling me where they felt their kid was best suited. Or those who got pissed I didn't select them to be on their team. In cases like this, whenever they did go away, I always thought, good riddance. But what sets the following examples apart is these parents outright tried to interfere with what I was doing, on top of their kid not being fun to coach. The first example here is a parent we'll call Beatrice. Now, she actually played on my ex-wife's adult league teams, and even my ex-wife couldn't stand her. She had a really shitty attitude on and in the locker room, and walked around like her stuff didn't stink. And she was also known to smoke cigarettes while her son Roman was sitting in the car with her. Yeah, that's illegal. So when Roman was assigned to be on my rec league team for a season, I dreaded it because I didn't want Beatrice anywhere near the locker room. In fact, one day she did step in to walk her son in, and she reeked of alcohol, cigarette smoke, and weed, and managed to leave a stench behind that was bad enough for me and the assistant coach to look at each other in disbelief. And because Roman didn't play hockey nor practice that much, whenever he did, he looked as lost as a ball in high weeds. But Beatrice never wanted me to be tough on him nor hold him accountable. So one game we lost, and Beatrice tried going into the locker room when I didn't want the parents in there. So after she got kicked out, she went to my assistant coach and said, well, make sure he doesn't verbally abuse Roman. And reportedly, she always held her ear to the locker room door when it was always closed. She clearly didn't like nor trust me as a coach. So we endured Beatrice stuff until about midway through the season, when the Metro Ice Rec League director told me he was assigning a new player to me. And I said, you know, that's nice of you, but I already have too many players on the roster. Can you move one of my kids to another team? Sure, Anthony, that's fair. Who should I move? So when I had that opportunity to move someone to another team, guess who was the first player I thought of? You guessed it, Beatrice. I mean her son, Roman. But you get the idea. But then it got even better, because as it turned out, this new kid I was assigned turned out to be a travel player who could pretty much go coast to coast and score at will. Thus, in one swift mood, I got rid of the player on the team I couldn't stand and his mom, and was handed a stud that made the team unbeatable. It even caused my ex, whose son was now playing on opposing teams in the same division after we divorced, to call me and say, "Hey, what the hell? It looks like you added a ringer to your team." And I responded back, "I didn't ask for this kid to be on my team. The Metro Ice director just sent him to me. And to make room, I got them to move Beatrice kid off the team." And her response, "Ew, oh God, Beatrice? Oh yeah, I'd have gotten rid of her too." So yeah, coaches will get rid of kids the first chance they get if they're done dealing with their respective parents. It can be said that Baldwin and his parents were a 2-in-1 package. It can be said that Eddie and his parents were a 2-in-1 package. And these were kids that were terrible teammates to begin with, but you also had these parents that felt the need to interfere as much as they did, which ruined their kids' reputations even more. Baldwin's parents were the type that if they wanted something done on the ice, whatever it was, they went straight to the club president rather than first discuss it with their head coach. It was a pain in the ass when I'd get calls from the Monarchs president over comments said by Baldwin's parents. During the so-called COVID season, where we were really not allowed to do anything but local clinics and open scrimmages to keep the kids on the ice, the one thing we were maintaining was that kids played with and against kids their age. And we were only allowing certain players to play up if they were both skilled enough and going to move up the next age level, the next season. But as I was coaching Baldwin's age group, he kept telling me, "My parents want me with the other kids. My mom says she doesn't want me with this group." And I just said, "Well, great. They can come talk to me about it first. They don't get to decide that." And then as the clinic went on, the damn Monarchs president pulled me aside in front of everybody at the rink and said, "Anthony, can you just put Baldwin with the other group? I'm sick of hearing it from his parents." Well, then, Mr. President, tell his parents to talk to me about it. "I'm sorry, Anthony. I'm done talking to them. Just please do it." And yes, it pissed me off, but when your boss is telling you to do something, there's not much else you can do. After that, we saw that Baldwin's parents paid to have him play on both the 14U and the 16U scrimmages, even though it was against our eligibility rules. But when our other coaches objected, we were told by the Monarchs Club president to allow it for money reasons. And after some time, Baldwin's parents again tried to complain that the 16U kids were being mean to him, blah, blah, blah. And once again, the coaches investigated and concluded it was the other way around. The 16U coach finally was able to get rid of him off of a technicality, and then we finally got our Monarchs president to stop bending the knee for them. And once again, I'm only talking about what the parents would do. If you want to hear more about what Eddie did or what Baldwin did that made them such terrible teammates, you'll have to hear it in another rant. Now, I thank you to all who listened to some or all of the examples I gave. And I'm sure those who listen can think of similar examples that they'd love to share, whether it was their own parents or somebody that they dealt with. Now, if you want to ask me how my father was as a hockey dad, well, was he perfect? No. He will be the first to admit that he was really tough on me. Some might say too tough. And yeah, like any father-son relationship, we definitely had those intense talks and those come to Jesus moments afterwards. But I will also be the first to admit that as a child and teenager growing up, I was not easy to deal with, whether it was at home or on the ice. So yeah, just like any parent, he had his faults. But did he force me to play hockey? No. Did he ever go after the coach if he felt I was unfairly short on playing time? Never. Did he expect too much out of me? No. Did he ever try to rush me up in age and skill levels? No. Whenever my parents' marriage got strained and wasn't always puppies and chocolate, did my parents let that interfere with taking me to events? Never. And as someone with Asperger's in my formative years, which took me a while to become normal, as they said. Did my dad ever use that as an excuse for poor behavior, difficult ways of communicating, or anything else I did wrong? Absolutely not. I was held accountable just as much as anyone. Did he ever bribe me with money or presents if I performed well enough? No. Did he ever care at all what skill level I played? No. Was he a pain in the ass to coaches? Or did he even abuse his status as a board member of the clubs I played and coached for? Never. Here is one thing that my dad did do. He learned from his mistakes. He learned how to be the right kind of hockey parent just as much as I had to learn how to be the right kind of player. He also had the guidance of some really great minds, from former NFL players whose sons were teammates of mine to fathers of players who made it in the juniors and college teams and the minors. As such, he learned how to balance the positive support with harsh, constructive criticism, depending on what I deserved. And if you are a parent who heard these earlier examples I gave you and may fit into any of these categories and realize it's not making your kid enjoy the sport nor helping your relationship with them, it's not too late. Don't do anything that's going to potentially ruin your child's love for the sport and further strain your relationship with them. Because before you know it, their time in youth sports is going to be done. Life is going to move on. Time is going to move forward. So you want to make sure that they will be able to look back fondly at that time you spent together, because that's the time you will never get back nor be able to change. And at the end of the day, the bonding, the experiences are what it's all about. And where they end up, if they end up successful at the sport, is the icing on the cake. I'm Desert Coyote 22. Thanks for listening.